Hare Hare. So we'll start. We are beginning the new chapter, chapter 21. The previous one was Stay High Forever. Stay High Forever. It's a use. We discussed many subject matters. Previous one. People are developing more and more taste. Initiations are taking place. And now, chapter 21, Beyond the Lower East Side. But we were shocked that he was going to leave. I never thought that Krishna consciousness would go beyond the Lower East Side. What to speak of New York City? I thought that this was it and it would stay here eternally. Brahmananda. Hare Krishna was becoming popular. Regular kirtans in the park, newspaper coverage. Hayagriv called it the Hare Krishna explosion. The lowest side hippies considered the chanting of Hare Krishna one of the grooviest things happening, and that the Swami's disciples didn't take LSD didn't seem to affect their popularity. The devotees were accepted as angelic people, carrying the peaceful chanting to others and offering free food and free place to stay. You could get the most interesting vegetarian food free at their place if you went at the right time. And in the storefront, on the shelf by the door, were books from India. In the clubs, local musicians played the melody that they had picked up from the Swami when he chanted in the park and at the temple. The Lower East Side was a neighborhood of artists and musicians, and now it was also the neighborhood of Hare Krishna. Burton Green. Musicians were influenced by it. The Krishna chant, Govinda Jaya Jaya, and other chants. I used some of those chants when I recorded. A lot of musicians reached out for this in different ways. We would explode in a short time and blow off, but then keep the chant underneath as a basis. A lot of people found that spiritual vibration even in the midst of the heavy music they were doing. They were becoming devotee musicians. Evening kirtans were always big. Brahmananda used to stand by the back door every night and watch the room fill up until there was no place left to sit. There was a lot of interest in the group chanting and music making. But after the kirtan, when the talk was to begin, people would start to leave. It is not uncommon for half the audience to leave before the talk began, and sometimes the people would leave in the middle of the lecture. One evening, Allen Ginsberg brought Ed Sanders and Tully Kofferberg of the Fugs to the meeting. How you spell it, Fugs?
I guess so. I don't know that one.
The Fugs, a local group that had made a name for themselves, specialized in obscene lyrics. Among the popular songs of Ed Sanders were Slum Goddess of the Lower East Side, Group Grope, and I Can't Get High. Ed had wild red hair and an electric red beard, and he played a guitar during the kirtan. The devotees were happy to see their prestigious guests. The night of the Fugs, however, Prabhupada chose to speak on the illusion of sexual pleasure. Sex pleasure binds us to this material world, birth after birth, he said. And he quoted, as you often did, a verse of Yamunacharya. Since I have become Krishna conscious, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it, and I spit at the thought. The Fugs never returned. And the Fugs never returned. So here, this is the theme we'll be going to read, Beyond the Lower East Side. Brahmananda, when never thought, people think that's it. It's the fact. But Prabhupada is the whole worldwide mission. And ordinary, it's like a In front of the sun, there's a sun, sun rays, sunshine. It has no much value. So all the new people, they had no idea what it is. They're speculating among themselves. So at least now it is becoming popular, and news coverages are there. People seems liking it, especially chanting, and free food. It was attracting many musicians. Books were available, so people picked up the chanting, the melody, and everything they were singing. Now, Burton Green, he says that musicians are influenced by it, the Krishna chant, different types of chanting. So there's a little uproar, looks like, there's explode with this music, and they experience the spiritual vibrations, even in the midst of the heavy music they were doing. Kirtan seems like very effective. So Brahmananda used to sit back by the back door every night and watch the room fills up until there's no place to sit. People used to join. But as soon as the Kirtan is over, many people used to leave because they didn't know. They were interested in Kirtan, looks like, not even talk at that time. It is not uncommon that for half the audience to leave before the talk begins. Till now, we see the culture is there. Not many people are interested in the philosophy, only Kirtan only there. So unfortunately with Kirtan, you grow, but you never learn the philosophy, you never become serious. You never understand the glories of the holy name. So that's, anyway, Allen Ginsberg brought his, friends, Ed Sanders and Tully Kofferberg of the Fox meeting. They came, they joined. Prabhupada spoke about a little heavy subject, looks like, on the illusion of sexual pleasure. They didn't understand Prabhupada was so. If they would have understood, they would have come back anyway. So he said how the sex life binds to the material world. And Yamunacharya, the great Acharya, after developing the higher taste of Krishna consciousness, he developed distasteful for the sex lives experiences. So that's what. AJ, you please go ahead.
To speak ill of sexual pleasure was certainly not a strategic move for one who wanted to create followers among the Lower East Side hippies. But Prabhupada never considered changing his message. In fact, when Umapati had mentioned that Americans didn't like to hear that sex was only for conceiving children, Prabhupada had replied, "I cannot change the philosophy to please the Americans." "What about sex?" asked the ISKCON attorney, Steve Goldsmith, one evening, speaking out from the rear of the crowded temple. "Sex should only be with one's wife," Prabhupada said, "and that is also restricted. Sex is for the propagation of Krishna-conscious children. My spiritual master used to say that to beget Krishna-conscious children, he was prepared to have sex 100 times. Of course, that is most difficult in this age. Therefore, he remained a brahmachari." But sex is a very strong force, Mr. Goldsmith challenged. What a man feels for a woman is undeniable. Therefore, in every culture, there is the institution of marriage, Prabhupada replied. You can get yourself married and live peacefully with one woman, but the wife should not be used as a machine for sense gratification. Sex should be restricted to once a month and only for the propagation of children. Hayagriva, who was seated just to Swamiji's left, besides the large dangling symbol, spoke out suddenly. "Only once a month?" And with a touch of facetious humor, he added loudly, "Better to forget the whole thing." "Yes, that's it. Very good boy," Swamiji laughed, and others joined him. "It is best not to think of it. Best just to chant Hare Krishna." And he held up his hands as if he were chanting on a strand of beads. "That way we will be saved from so much botheration. Sex is like an itching sensation, that's all. As when we scratch, it gets worse. So we should tolerate the itching and ask Krishna to help us. It is not easy. Sex is the highest pleasure in the material world, and it is also the greatest bondage." So yeah, Prabhupada's preaching a heavy message to the generation of sex, love, and rock and roll, right? So sex, drugs, and rock and roll, rather. And I, he says when he's asked, or well, before that, they say, hey, someone told him, Umapati said, hey, they're not gonna like to hear this. And Prabhupada flat out said, like, I'm not going to change this, change the whole philosophy to please Americans. It is what it is. So, he goes further to say, it should only be to, you should only have sex to have children, and specifically Krishna conscious children. And even then, only in marriage. Pretty standard fare, I guess, right? Only in marriage. But I think what's surprising is he says, and only once a month. Only do it once a month. And yeah, but I think a pretty important line there is probably in that top paragraph there. The wife should not be used as a machine for sense gratification, I think is a nice line. But yeah, that's kind of the overall gist of it. He's telling these folks, just forget about it, pretty much. Chant instead.
People do not know the science. And because we are talking about escaping from this material world, and it's very hard because millions of lifetimes conditions. Very hard to understand that how we are difficult it is, and that's the secret. And it is also the greatest bondage, it says. Okay, Saikiran Prabhu.
Sure, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. But Steve Goldsmith was shaking his head. Prabhupada looked at him, smiling. There is still a problem. It is just that, well, it's been proved dangerous to repress the sex drive. There is a theory that we have wars because people are eating meat, Prabhupada interrupted. As long as people eat meat, there will be war. And if a man eats meat, he will be sure to have illicit sex also. Steve Goldsmith was an influential friend and supporter of ISKCON, but Prabhupada would not change the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to please the Americans. Judson Hall on West 57th Street cost $200 to rent for one night. Rai Rama thought it was time Swamiji tried reaching some of the more sophisticated New Yorkers, and since Judson Hall was near Carnegie Hall and sometimes had interesting concerts and lectures, he thought it would be a good place to start. Swamiji agreed to the idea, and Rai Rama printed an announcement which he distributed in Midtown bookstores. On the night of the event, the devotees paraded through the Midtown entertainment areas, beating a bass drum and handing out leaflets. Then they returned to Judson Hall for the program. Only 7 people attended. The devotees felt terrible. They had misled Swamiji and spent the equivalent of a month's rent. We can cancel the program if you like, Swamiji, Rai Rama said. But Prabhupada replied, no, let us chant and speak. So the devotees took the stage and chanted with Swamiji and danced, and then sat beside him as he lectured, his voice echoing through the empty hall. Afterwards, Swamiji called for questions, and a young man about 15 vacant rows asked whether he was correct in understanding that the Swami's philosophy was primarily for reforming destitute young people. So here, basically the discussion with Goldsmith continues, where Prabhupada, where he says that it is dangerous to suppress the sex drive, and there is a theory, and he was going to complete that wars are caused because of sex, but Prabhupada interrupts him and says it is because of eating meat, and people, when they eat meat, there will be war, and then that also will lead to illicit sex. So Steve Goldsmith was one of the influential finder, and he also, I think, helped when Prabhupada was registering ISKCON. So Prabhupada would not just change the philosophy to please Steve Goldsmith or Americans. Then Judson Hall was basically like an auditorium, I think, which was on West 57th Street. So it was outside the, it was in the Midtown area, and Rai Rama thought it was better to reach to some sophisticated New Yorkers, where there were different concerts and lectures happening in that area. Swamiji agreed, and they printed an announcement and they advertised it to bookstores. So, but the day when they had come, only 7 people attended, and they thought they felt terrible, and they asked if they want to cancel the program. And Prabhupada said, "No, let us speak." So they chanted and danced, and basically, one young person asked a question, asking if the philosophy that Swamiji was preaching was only for, like the hippies and everyone, for the poor people.
Okay. Who else? Nipa, you please read.
Hare Krishna.
Read it.
No, Prabhupada replied, everyone in this material world is lost, and this, even the so-called successful person, because everyone has forgotten Krishna. After the program, Swamiji sat in a chair by the exit as the few members of the audience were leaving. A respectable-looking couple introduced themselves, and Swamiji sat up very straight with folded palms and smiled. Brahmananda's mother was present, and Swamiji was very cordial towards her. But in general, the devotees were depressed at the small turnout. I'm sorry, Swamiji. We invited you here and almost no one came. Rama apologized, but Prabhupada raised his eyebrows and said, no one? You did not see Narada? You did not see Lord Brahma? When there is chanting of Hare Krishna, even the demigods come to participate. Back at the temple, Prabhupada chided Rai Rama, I told you we should have charged money. When something is free, people think it is worthless. But just charge $3 or $5 and people will think, oh, you are offering some very valuable thing. In Bengal, there is the story of a man who went house to house offering free mangoes, and no one would take his mangoes because everyone thought, oh, why is he giving away these mangoes? There must be something wrong with them. So he charged 3 rupees, and then they thought, these look like good mangoes. The price is only 3 rupees, all right. So when people see that something is free, they think it is worthless. Charge them some money and they will think it is very nice. So here Prabhupada replies to the previous question. I think it's about whether it is only for hippies, if I'm not wrong, Prabhuji. So Prabhupada replies, no, everyone in the material world is lost and is destitute, even the successful, because everyone has kind of forgotten Krishna. After the program, Swamiji was sitting in the chair by the exit and audience were leaving. A couple then introduced themselves and Swamiji sat straight and smiled at them. Brahmanand's mother was also present, and Swamiji was cordial to her. But in general, the devotees was depressed at the small group of people turning for this event. I'm sorry, Swamiji. Rai Ramaya said that we invited, but no one came. But Prabhupada raised his eyebrows and kind of was saying, no one. There was like you did not see Narada, you did not see Lord Brahma. When there's a chanting, even the demigods come and participate. So Swamiji was portraying that there were many people, even demigods were participating. And back at temple, Prabhupada chided to Rai Rama that he should have charged money, because when something goes for free, people think it's worthless. By charging even $3 or $5, people think they are offering something valuable. And then the story comes how it is like a man in Bengal who went house to house offering mangoes, and no one would take for free because they thought that giving away for free there's something wrong with the mangoes. So he charged 3 rupees, and then people look at the mangoes and say, oh, it's 3 rupees, all right. So when you give for free, it's worthless. So we have to charge something.
Right. Vasanti?
Burton Green was a musician, fond of Swami and fond of banging on the innards of the piano in the temple during Kirtana. Burton Green. We had a really explosive thing to break out of with this capitalistic, materialistic egg sitting on us. So there was so much ferocity in the music to break out of. But spinning out like that, you could have a nervous breakdown. So it was great to go to the Swami's and chant in his small storefront on Second Avenue. The streets were full of Maya and perversion, and his was a place to really mellow out. It was great to chant there to balance my life. It was great to sit and have prasadam with the Swami and get some real authentic Indian cooking and chapatis and talk about things, especially when I had very little money in my pocket. It was always nice to go. When Burton asked Prabhupada to attend his piano recital at Town Hall Theatre, Prabhupada agreed. Brahmananda, about 7 or 8 of us in our sneakers and jeans had ridden on the subway with Swamiji to Town Hall. We went in and took our seats and concert began. Burton Green came out, opened the piano top, took a hammer and began wildly hitting on the strings inside the piano. And it went on for an hour and a half. We were all sitting there with Swamiji and we all began chanting on our beats. There were only about 2 dozen people in the whole theatre. Then the intermission came, and Swamiji wanted to go to the toilet room, and I went along and helped him, turning on the water in the sink, getting a paper towel for him. Doing these little services for Swamiji seemed like the perfection of my life. There was something so great about him that just doing those things was my perfection. And I felt like I was protecting him like I was his personal bodyguard. Coming up on the subway, I had shown him how the subway worked and answered his questions. It all seemed very intimate. Burton Green explains that he feels the situation at that time was capitalistic, materialistic, and then it is very nice to sit in the storefront of the Second Avenue with Swami and do the Kirtana. And he explains that the streets are full of Maya and perversion, and doing Kirtana with Swamiji balanced his life, and he liked the prasadam over there, and the food is authentic Indian cooking, um, and it is always nice to go over there. He invited Prabhupada for his piano recital, and Brahmananda and along with 7, 8 people went to, and Swamiji went to the town hall, and the concert began. There were only like 2 dozen people, and Burton Green came out and opened his piano top, took a hammer, and began widely hitting. I didn't understand what this is, but that's how he's playing the piano. And it went on for hour and a half. And Swamiji and others started chanting on the beats. And later, Swamiji has to visit the toilet room. Then Brahmananda would help him with the little services like opening water in the sink and giving him a paper towel. Um, he really wanted to do service to Swamiji, and even the little services gave him felt like the perfection of life. And he also explained Swamiji how to travel in the subway, and he feels like a personal bodyguard to him. It all seemed very intimate.
Thank you so much. Brahmanand Swami, he became a big help. Pranatu.
Hare Krishna. Anyway, we went back upstairs to our seats, and Burton Green came right up to Swamiji saying, "Swamiji, are you happy? Are you comfortable? Do you like it?" And Swamiji was very polite and said, "Yes, And Burton said, "Now the second part is coming." I interrupted and tried to say that Swamiji is very tired and he takes rest at 10. It was already after 10, so I said we had to go back. But he pressed Swamiji to stay for the second half, and so we had to stay. Then the poets came out and recited poetry. We were there until 11:30, and then we had to ride back on the subway. But a few weeks later, I learned that Prabhupada had another reason for going to town hall. He was thinking of renting it for a temple, and he wanted to see it. The Gate Theatre was a small auditorium on 2nd Avenue, about 10 blocks north of the storefront. Satswarupa. We rented the Gate Theatre for one night. It was a dark place, painted all black. The theater was almost empty. We had an easel on stage with a painting of the Panchatattva. Swamiji spoke, and his talk became very technical. Pointing and referring back to the painting, he described each member of the Panchatattva. He first explained that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead appearing as a pure devotee. Lord Nityananda, to the right of Lord Chaitanya, is his first expansion, and to the right of Lord Nityananda is Advaita, who is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord. To the left of Lord Chaitanya, he said, is Gadadhar, the internal energy, and Srivas is the perfect devotee. During the talk, I was thinking that this was maybe too elevated for the audience, but I was sitting close beside Swamiji, and like the other devotees, I was really enjoying being with him. After the Gate engagement, Swamiji and his disciples agreed that it was a waste of time trying to rent theaters. It was better to go to Tompkins Square Park. That was the best place for attracting people, and it didn't cost anything. So, this is Burton Green mentioning here about, Prabhupada, and this is at the Gate Theatre, where
He was performing.
yeah, he was performing, and he stayed there, Prabhupada, to stay for the second half, and so they stayed, and it was almost 11:30, and then they went back. And one of the reasons why Prabhupada had stayed there was he was thinking of renting it for the temple, so he wanted to check it out. And then Satswarup Maharaj is explaining here that they rented the Gate Theatre for one night, and it was almost empty. And Prabhupada was talking about describing the Panchatattva painting and describing each and every personality in the Panchatattva. And Satswarup Maharaj felt that it was too technical subject for the audience, but he was very much enjoying sitting right beside Prabhupada and hearing. But then later on, they concluded that after that experience, that it was pretty much a waste of time to rent theaters and was expensive. So they decided to go to Tompkins Square Park for attracting people, and it wouldn't cost much.
Go ahead.
It was 11 p.m. and a light was on in Swamiji's apartment, in the kitchenette. Swamiji was staying up teaching Kirtananda and Brahmananda how to cook. Because the next day, Sunday, they would be holding a feast for the public. Kirtananda had suggested it be advertised as a love feast, and Swamiji had adopted the name. Although some thought it sounded strange at first to hear him say love feast. The devotees had put up posters around the neighborhood and had made a sign for the window of the storefront, and Swamiji had said he would cook enough for at least 50 people. He said the love feast should become an important part of ISKCON, as he had explained many times. Who would offer to Krishna becomes spiritual, and whoever eats prasadam will receive great spiritual benefit. Prasadam meant mercy. His two helpers stood respectfully beside him, sometimes stepping back out of his way as he moved and sometimes looking over his shoulder. as he mixed spices or set a pan over the flames, or called for another ingredient. He was stirring a big pot of sweet rice with a wooden spoon. It had to be stirred constantly, and slowly adding milk. If the sweet rice burned, it would be ruined, he said, and he handed the spoon to Kirtananda. He next showed them how to make ghee by heating butter in a wok and separating the milk solids from the butter fat. And he simultaneously taught them how to make apple chutney. Prabhupada was silent as he cooked, but when Brahmananda asked him how he had learned so much about cooking, Prabhupada said that he had learned by watching his mother. He laughed and said it had not been like it is in the West, where you take a lump of flesh from a refrigerator, throw it in a pan, boil it, sprinkle it with salt, and then eat like an animal. In Korea, he said they eat dogs. But human beings should eat grains, fruits, vegetables, and milk. And
Wow.
and the cow especially should not be killed. So it was 11 p.m. Prabhupada was teaching Kirtananda and Brahmananda how to cook because next day they had holding a feast for Sunday. And from here we get the Sunday Love Feast when Kirtananda said it should be advertised as Love Feast. And Prabhupada adopted it and he said that this Sunday feast should be an important thing for ISKCON because whoever eats the prasadam receives great spiritual benefit, and prasadam means mercy. Then they started making sweet rice, and Prabhupada said had to be continuously stirred so it won't get burned on the bottom. And then he taught them how to make ghee, and then he also taught them how to make apple chutney. Then Brahmananda asked him how he had learned so much cooking, and Prabhupada said he had learned by watching his mother. And he said it's not like how in the West, where they just take meat from the fridge and just throw it in a pan, boil it, and then just sprinkle it with salt. He said how in other countries like Korea, they eat dogs. But Prabhupada said that human beings should eat the grains, fruits, vegetables, and milk. And they should especially not kill the cows.
Okay. Sridhari or Seeker?
When Brahmananda cut the apples for the chutney and put them in a pot for steaming, and Kirtananda stirred the sweet rice, Swamiji prepared masala, the basic mixture of spices which he would soon add to the steaming apples. The familiar smell of red pepper and cumin seeds entered their nostrils sharply as the masala crackled and smoked in the hot ghee in the tiny frying pan. With three separate operations going on at once, sweet rice, steaming apples, and masala, Prabhupada cautioned Kirtananda to stir the sweet rice steadily and scrape the bottom of the pot. And he took the spoon for a moment from Kirtananda's hand and demonstrated how to stir it properly. Sweet rice, chutney, and certain other dishes could be made in advance of the feast, he explained, but many things would have to be done the next morning. Prabhupada rose early, despite having kept late hours the night before, and after the morning class, he went back in the kitchen. Now, half a dozen disciples sat in his front room making dough for puris and samosas. He had shown them how to make the dough, and Umapati had kneaded for a while by pounding the soft dough with his fists. But Brahmananda was better at it, socking the weight of his frizzler's body onto the large lump of dough. As Swamiji entered the room to examine the quality of puris, his disciples looked up at them respectfully. They were always serious when he was present. He picked up a puri and examined it. It is not to the standard, he said, but it will have to do. Then, amid crumpled rejects and oddly shaped pieces of dough, he squatted down beside his helpers, who were trying as best they could, though making a mess. He took a small ball of dough, pressed it flat with his fingers, and then deftly rolled it out until it curled around the wooden pins and then fell off. A perfectly round puri. He held it up, displaying a translucent, thin but not too thin pat, patty of dough. Make them like this, he said, but hurry. On discovering that the dough was too stiff, Swamiji added a little ghee and then a little milk and kneaded the dough to a softer texture. Everything should be just right, he said, and his disciples took to their menial task with concentrated earnestness. Who among them had ever heard of these things before, puris and samosas? It was all new, And the challenge, something very important. It was a part of devotional service. So here we see Srila Prabhupada is teaching his disciples how to cook a feast for the Sunday program. So in the kitchen, like Brahmananda, he was cutting apples for the chutney, and then he put them in a pot for steaming, and then simultaneously Kirtananda Maharaj was stirring the sweet rice, and Srila Prabhupada was preparing the masala, the mixture. And as all these three tasks were happening simultaneously, and sometimes Srila Prabhupada would keep checking in between Kirtananda Maharaj, and then he would caution to stir the sweet rice properly, so that it should not stick. And at what point he took the spoon from him and then showed him how to scrape the bottom and then stir the sweet rice properly. So, and Srila Prabhupada said, like some things like sweet rice, chutney, and certain other dishes, they can make it in advance of the feast. But there are certain things that should be done just before the program. And then the next day, Sunday morning, Srila Prabhupada rose early, though he stayed very late the night before. And then he went back into the kitchen and he saw that some of his disciples were sitting in front of him, and then they were preparing the dough for puris and samosas. And then Umapati, one devotee, he needed the dough. But again, Brahmananda Maharaj, he took it from him because he was little heavily built body. So he was able to easily knead the dough. And then actually Prabhupada entered the kitchen. He examined the qualities of the puris, and then he held one in his hand, and then he said that it's not up to the standard. And then Prabhupada himself, he sat with his disciples, and then he showed them how to make one puri. He made a nice round ball, and then he made a puri, pressed it flat, and then it was like correct texture and then thickness, everything. And then he said it should make them like this, but he asked them to hurry. And then and when Srila Prabhupada saw that, when the dough was too stiff, and he added some ghee to it, and then little milk, and then kneaded the dough with softer texture. And as Prabhupada mentioned, everything should be just right. But again, all this was very new to all his American disciples. Like nobody would have ever heard in their life about puris or samosas. So it was all new, but still a challenge, very important, because every small act in Krishna service, it's in devotional service is very something very great.
If you notice that how everybody used to come and helping, serving together. So that's the Sunday feast, means all the devotees, core devotees, core members who have been coming should come and help and setting up everything. That's the mood of a community. Then only we can grow. Yes, Sridhari.
Swamiji did much of the cooking as he simultaneously supervised his helpers. He was always near, walking barefoot back to the kitchen, then to the front room, then to his own room in the rear. And even when he went to his back room, his disciples could see him through the window in the wall. Swamiji saw each of the nearly 12 dishes through its final stages, and his disciples carried them into the front room in pots one by one and placed them before the picture of Lord Chaitanya. There was halawa, dal, 2 sabzis, fancy rice, puris, samosas, sweet rice, apple chutney, and gulab jamuns or sweet balls, ISKCON bullets. Prabhupada had personally spent much time slowly deep frying the sweet balls on a low heat until they had turned golden brown and full. Then, one by one, he had lifted them out of the ghee with a slotted spoon and put them to soak in sugar syrup. He recognized that these golden ghee-fried milk balls soaked with sugar water were his disciples' favorite prasadam treat. He called them ISKCON bullets because they were weapons in the war against Maya. He even allowed that a jar of ISKCON bullets floating in their syrup be always on hand in the front room, where his disciples could take them without asking permission and without observing any regulated hours. They could take as many as they liked. So, Prabhupada was simultaneously cooking and supervising his disciples. He used to go back and forth to the kitchen and to his front room, and also to the back room. And even when he was in his back room, disciples could see him through the window in the wall. And by the end of preparing all the dishes, there were about 1 dozen dishes, and all his disciples carried them to the front room and placed before the picture of Lord Chaitanya. So different dishes were there like halwa, dal, sabzi, puris, and all. And even gulab jamun was there, which they called sweet balls or iskon billets. And Prabhupada personally spent much time by slowly deep frying those gulab jamuns because his disciples liked. I mean, it was his disciples' favorite prasadam treat, and he even called them as iskon billets because they were used as weapons in the war against Maya. Uh, and that gulab jamun jar was kept in the front room because so that his disciples can take at any time without observing any, I mean, without even asking any permission or without observing any regulated hours, and they can even take as many as they liked. That's it.
Vijayanand Prabhu.
Kirtananda brought in the samosa filling, which he had prepared from spinach and green peas cooked to a paste, and which the Swami had heavily spiced. Stuffing the samosas was an art. The Swamiji showed them how to do it. He took a semicircle of dough, shaped it into a cone, stuffed it with a spoonful of filling, and then folded the top over and sealed it as samosa ready for the hot ghee. Achyutananda carried the imperfectly shaped puris into the kitchen, where he and Kirtananda deep fried them 2 at a time. If the temperature of the ghee, the consistency of the dough, and the size, shape, and thickness of the puris were all just right, the puris would cook in only a few seconds, rising to the surface of the ghee, where they would inflate like little balloons. The cooks then stood them on edge in a cardboard box to drain off the excess ghee. As they completed the last preparations for the feast, Swamiji's disciples washed the stiff dough from their hands and went down to the storefront, where they sat out the straw mats and awaited the guests and the feast. Upstairs, Swamiji and a couple of his cooks offered all the preparations to Lord Chaitanya, reciting the Parampara prayer. The first few love feasts were not very well attended, but the devotees were so enthusiastic about the feast prasadam that they showed no disappointment over the scarcity of guests. They were prepared to eat everything. Satsvarupa. There was something called Brahmana spaghetti, which was rice flour noodles cooked in ghee and soaked in sugar water. And there was halwa, puspanna rice with fried cheese balls, samosas, split mung beans fried into crunchy pellets and mixed with salt and spices. Puris, gulab jamuns, and everything was succulent. That was the word Hayagriva used. Yes, he would say, expressing it waggishly, everything was very succulent. So these passages describe how the various dish preparation was happening and how it was offered and how it was made ready for the feast. So Kirtananda brought samosa filling, which he had prepared from the spinach and the green peas, and Swamiji taught them showed them how to prepare a samosa, taking a semicircle of the dough and shaped into a cone and with a spoonful of filling, and then sealed it and placed it over hot ghee. And Achyutananda carried the imperfectly shaped puris, and Achyutananda and Kirtananda took the imperfectly shaped puris and they deep fried 2 at a time. And if all the all the temperature, consistency, size, shape, and thickness, if all are right, then the puris would just like will be ready in another two seconds. And like it will inflate like a little balloons, and so this is how they prepare puri. And once they completed the all the last preparations, they washed their hands, and they went down to the storefront. So they were waiting for the guests to come. And in the meantime, like Swamiji and his couple of cooks offered the preparations to Lord Chaitanya, and by reciting the prayer, Parampara prayer. And so the initially only few people attended for the love feast in the beginning, but the devotees were so enthusiastic about the prasadam, and they showed no disappointment over the scarcity, because they were prepared to eat everything. And also it describes about another special dish called Brahmana spaghetti, which was prepared from the rice flour noodles and cooked in ghee, cooked in sugar water. And there was like various other dishes like halwa, pushpana rice, the cheese balls, samosas, and the mung beans fried into crunchy pellets. So like also it has puris, gulab jamuns, and everything was succulent. So this describes in detail how the different types of dishes are made and available for prasadam for the guests.
Thank you. Brajrasva, please read.
Hare Krishna. Eating the feast was an intense experience. We were supposed to be subduing our senses all week, following strict regulations, controlling the tongue. And the feast was a kind of reward. Swamiji and Krishna were giving us a taste of full spiritual ecstasy, even though we were still beginners and still in the material world. Before taking my plate full, I would pray, please let me remain in Krishna consciousness and let me now enjoy this feast in transcendental bliss. And I would begin eating, going from one taste sensation to another. The good rice, the favorite vegetable, the bread, and saving the gulab jamun for last, thinking I can have seconds, and if I like, thirds. We would keep our eyes on the big pots, confident that there was as much as we wanted. It was a time of rededication. We all enjoyed with completely open relish and sense gratification. Eating was very important. Gradually, attendance picked up. The feasts were free and they were reputed to be delicious. Mostly local hippies came, but occasionally a higher class of experimenting New Yorkers or even the parents of one of the devotees would come. When the small temple was filled, guests would sit in the courtyard. They would take their prasadam, leaden paper plates, and their wooden spoons into the backyard garden and sit beneath the fire escape or at the picnic table or anywhere. And after eating, they would go back into the storefront for some more. For more, devotees were stationed behind the pots of prasadam, and the guests would come back for seconds. Other tenants were not very happy about seeing the courtyard full of festive guests, and the devotees tried to pacify them by bringing them plates of prasadam. Although Swamiji would not go down to the temple, he would take a plate in his room and hear with pleasure about the success of his new program. So Prabhupada is so here experience has been shared by devotee how prasadam has actually very important for them, and the prayers was that we keep coming to Krishna bhakti, Krishna consciousness to enjoy this feast, even though we are fallen. That was a prayer which was made, and then gradually people started coming. More people started coming. The feasts were free and delicious. So initially hippies used to come, and later on more sophisticated people, experimenters of New York's, they started coming, and even parents of the devotees started coming, and they were everywhere around the garden. And even at that time, as usual, the neighbors were little worried about, why there are so many people, the tenants nearby. And that's how devotees gave them also prasadam plate, and they also become favorable. And Prabhupada was very happy, that the pleasure of success of his new program. So that's
Very,
all.
very nice. So we can see the prasadam, nice prasadam,
Yes.
is the center of everything. And we can see that the initial group also formed because the prasadam and, of course, chanting was there, but miracles now it's going to grow. Okay. One time the devotees were eating so ravenously that they threatened to eat. They threatened to eat everything available before the guests had all been served. And Kirtananda had to admonish them to their selfish attitude. Gradually, they were understanding that the Sunday feast was not just for their fun and pleasure, but to bring people to Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada had begun Back to Garden magazine in India. Although he had been writing articles since the 1930s, it was in 1944 in Calcutta that he had single-handedly begun the magazine in response to a spiritual master's request that we preach Krishna consciousness in English. It had been with great difficulty that through his pharmaceutical business, he had managed to gather the 400 rupees a month for printing. And he had single-handedly written, edited, published, financed, and distributed each issue. In those early years, Back to Garden had been Prabhupada's major literary work and preaching mission. He had envisioned widespread distribution of the magazine, and he had thought of plans for spreading the message of Lord Chaitanya all over the world. He had drawn up a list of major countries and the number of copies of Back to Garden he wanted to send to each. He sought donations to finance this project, but help was scarce. Then in 1959, he had turned his energies towards writing and publishing Srimad Bhagavatam. But now he wanted to revive Back to Godhead. And this time it would not be done single-handedly. This time he would give the responsibility to his disciples. Now, Greg Scarf, now Gargamuni, since his recent initiation, found a press. A country club in Queens was trying to sell its small A.B. Dick press. Prabhupada was interested, and he rode out to Queens in a borrowed van with Gargamuni and Kirtananda to see the machine. It was old but in good condition. The manager of the country club wanted $250 for it. Prabhupada looked over the machine carefully and talked with the manager, telling him of his spiritual mission. The manager mentioned a second press he had on hand and explained that neither machine was actually of any use to him. So Prabhupada said he would pay $250 for both the machines. The country club did not really need them. And besides, the manager should help out, since Prabhupada had an important spiritual message to print for the benefit of all humanity. The man agreed. Prabhupada and Gargamuni and Kirtananda load both machines into the van, and ISKCON had its printing press. Haribo. So now here says, who will have a control when this delicious prasadam? You hope you all remember the menu. Who can serve the menu without reading that? Everybody? Samosas, gulab jamun, fancy rice, puris, 2 sabjis, what else? Some, halwa. Wow, it is very opulent, very, very opulent. Anyway, so now people are so attracted, devotees so attracted, they wanted to eat, but Kirtananda control, no, you have to wait this for the guests, let them eat first. Like we should eat with them, something like that. Anyway, Prabhupada reminds his memories of, again, from what he had before. He Back to Godhead magazine. He single-handedly started again in 44. But it was so much of difficulty. He was some successful, but didn't go well. Then he focused on Srimad Bhagavatam. That's where he saw a big success came. And interestingly, he finds there's a Greg scarf, no, sorry, Gargmuni, and finds the press. And the Queens, they're selling those printing machines. And he, along Prabhupada, along with Gargmuni and Sasur Swami, went and got 2 printing press for ISKCON now, first time. When you want to read? Huh? AJ?
Sure. Srila Prabhupada gave over the editorship of Back to Godhead magazine to Hayagriva and Rayarama. For so many years, he had taken Back to Godhead as his personal service to his spiritual master, but now he would let young men like Hayagriva, the English college teacher, and Rayaram, the professional writer, take up Back to Godhead magazine as their service to their spiritual master. In a short time, Hayagriva and Rayaram had compiled the first issue and were ready to print. It was an off night, no public kirtan and lecture, and Swamiji was up in his room working on his translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. Downstairs, the printing of the first issue had been going on for hours. Rayaram had typed the stencils, and during the printing, he had stood nervously over the machine, examining the printing quality of each page, stroking his beard and murmuring, Now it was time to collate and staple each magazine. The stencils had lasted for 100 copies, and 100 copies of each of the 28 pages and the front and back covers were now lined up along 2 of the unvarnished benches Raphael had made that summer. A few devotees collated and stapled the magazines in an assembly line, walking along the stacks of pages, taking one page under another until they reached the end of the bench and gave the assembled stack of pages to Gargamuni, who stood brushing his long hair out of his eyes, stapling each magazine with the stapler and staples that Brahmananda had brought from his Board of Education office. Even Hayagriva, who usually didn't volunteer for menial duties, was there, working down the line collating. So, yeah, they're just talking about Prabhupada had, while he used to do Back to Godhead by himself, and he did it as his service to his spiritual master. He, being an old man now, he said, hey, I'm going to let these young guys do it, especially young guys with credentials. One as an English teacher and the other was a professional writer. He was going to let them take over Back to Godhead as service to him, as service to their spiritual master. So the guys put together, Hayagriva and Rairam put together the first issue, and the whole gang got together to help compile it. And after it printed, they had 100 copies, and they set up a little assembly line to get them all together, and they were stapling them by hand and doing everything by hand. And I like that Brahmananda allocated the staples and the stapler from his day job, and used that to help put the first issue together.
Thank you. That's wonderful how Krishna has arranged. It's one of the difficult tasks, and one is a writer, the other one is
An English teacher. Yeah.
English teacher. Yes. Okay. Prasanthi, did you read today?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, you can read again.
Suddenly, the side door opened, and to their surprise, they saw Swamiji looking in at them. Then he opened the door wide and entered the room. He had never come down like this on an off night before. They felt an unexpected flush of emotion and love for him, and they dropped down on their knees, bowing their heads to the floor. No, no, he said, raising his hand to stop them, as some were still bowing and others already rising to their feet. Continue what you are doing. When they stood up and saw him standing with them, they weren't sure what to do. But obviously, he had come down to see them producing his Back to Godhead magazine. So they continued working, silently and efficiently. Prabhupada walked down the rows of pages, his hand and wrist extending gracefully from the folds of his shawl as he touched a stack of pages. and then a finished magazine. ISKCON Press, he added. Jagannatha had designed the cover using a pen and ink drawing of Radha and Krishna, similar to his painting in the temple. It was a simple drawing set within a pattern of concentric circles. The first page opened with the same motto Prabhupada had used for years on his Back to Godhead. Godhead is light, nescience is darkness. Where there is Godhead, there is no nescience. And on the same page, Hayagriva had not been able to resist giving a quotation from William Blake, approved by Swamiji, which sustained the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. God appears and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night, but does a human form display to those who dwell in the realms of day. Or yeah, should I continue?
You can explain. You can summarize.
Yeah. So the devotees started working for the Back to Godhead magazine, and they suddenly saw that the side door was open, and Swamiji was looking at them. Then he came into the room, and then they all bowed down, offering their obeisances. And Swamiji said not to do that and continue their work. And then they started working efficiently. And Swamiji saw those papers they printed, and he saw the stack of pages, and then he said, "This is his conference." And Jagannatha had designed the cover with pen and ink, drawing of Radha and Krishna, similar to the painting he drew some time ago. And it was in the pattern of concentric circles. Prabhupada, so the first page opened with the same motto Prabhupada has used a few years ago on his Back to Godhead. Godhead is the light, nescience is darkness. Where there is Godhead, there is no nescience. This was the motto. And Hayagriva also mentioned William Blake's poem, and he also got the approval of Swamiji, as it is up to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness.
That's great. That's great. Cyclone Prabhu.
God appears and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night, but does a human form display to those who dwell in realms of day. Although the editorial spoke of Blake, Whitman, and Jesus Christ, it stressed, it is to teach the science of devotion to God that Swami Bhaktivedanta has come to America. His message is simple: the chanting of the holy name of God, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Following the orders of his spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, Swami Bhaktivedanta began the initial publication of Back to Godhead in 1944. This bi-monthly, published from 1944 to 1956 in Vrindavan, India, established Swami Bhaktivedanta as the leading personalist in India. This issue marks the first publication of Back to Godhead in the West. The main article, a summary of a lecture given by Prabhupada, was based on notes taken by Umapati. It has been said that when we wake up and when we go to sleep, we should beat our mind 1,000 times with a shoe. When the mind says things like, why sing Hare Krishna? Why not take LSD? We should beat it with the same shoe. However, if you always think of Krishna, no beating will be necessary. The mind will be our best friend. So, so basically, this is the quote that was printed in the Back to Godhead magazine, which was from William Blake Whitman, where even though it spoke about Jesus Christ, basically Hayagriva got permission of Prabhupada to publish this. It says that Prabhupada came to America to spread the holy name of the God, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And basically, Back to Godhead, Prabhupada originally published it in 1944, and it was a bi-monthly. He published it for 12 years from Vrindavan, India. He used to go to Delhi actually for the printing when he was in Vrindavan. This established him as the leading personalist in India. And now in New York, in 1966, they are publishing the first Back to Godhead in the West. And the main article was basically a summary of a lecture given by Prabhupada by notes taken by Umapati, where it said that before we get up and after we get up and before we sleep, we should hit our head 1,000 times with a shoe, because that is how we can control ourselves from the mind going astray, where it questions us doing singing Krishna Hare Krishna or taking LSD. And it also says that if you think of Krishna, then no beating is necessary. We have to control our mind to make it our best friend.
Thank you. I hope I didn't read beat our head. It's beat our mind.
Yeah, beat our mind. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's going well. It's 8:40. Maybe we can have a quick summary of what we read. Then hopefully tomorrow we can finish. Any reflections today?
They held the first love feast, and kind of set that as a thing that's still going on, I guess.
Yes. Wonderful menu. ISKCON menu is used to be, not now much. There is several regions, in our temple also we have simple, but I was part of ISKCON menu at least in early in 2000. So in Philadelphia, they used to have wonderful feast, and everything used to be cooked with ghee. I know anyone knows everything when everything was cooked with ghee. We didn't follow in our temples; everything was ghee. So probably not now. Everything was being cooked with ghee, and very opulent, very nice, very nice. I wish one day you all will see those days again back. Hopefully we'll try, provided you all want to eat that food prepared with ghee now. Time is changing, but thank you. But we should still maintain the high class, good Sunday feast menu. So anything else?
The first publication of Back to Godhead magazine in the West.
Yes. Hayagriva Prabhu and Rama Rai. They become the editors of the magazine, Back to Godhead magazine. Very nice. And they got 2 printing presses, from Queens. That's so wonderful. Anything else? Anyone else remember anything?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, Prabhupada delivered a line after when there wasn't too many people at the when they booked the theater or the hall, and he was saying, hey, what do you mean there weren't a lot of people there? Did you see? I don't remember the names, but
Narad Muni and Lord Brahma. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a similar concept or a similar line that you find in the Bible about how it's something like where people are gathered in my name, I'm there. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. So it's like it doesn't have to be in the church. It doesn't have to be in the temple. It's as long as people are there and they're chanting, it does, or praying or thinking about God, it does the trick. So
yeah, that's the fact. Prabhupada never thought he's alone, because he always felt he's always with his spiritual master. And you remember that he had a dream Krishna personally sailed the ship. And when Krishna comes, what to talk about his devotees, Narad Muni, Brahma, they all, certainly they have come. others could not see. It is said that even when the pure devotees body, all the demigods also reside to assist. So that's a very not very surprised, but yeah, Prabhupada is not discouraged. And the rental hall didn't work out. And also, if you see Sunday feast, everybody is cooked together. All the key devotees, they come. I hope everybody's not, we are not just reading, we are observing, we are learning also, how we should be doing, right? Otherwise, how we should be taking some inspirations from these things. And when Prabhupada came, how all the disciples offered immediately respect. Awe and reverence was there with spiritual master, always. These are the things we not only just read, we imbibe into our life, we learn. These are great inspirations we are learning, because this is called also Bhagavata. Bhagavat means the life of a devotee, how the devotee lived as a living Bhagavata. So this we are learning. So many things we did, many things we did today, which is 8:44. We'll continue with tomorrow. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Have a good night.